And then on the animal performance side, we were kind of comparing a perennial only system where we had sheep and cattle grazing on a well-managed, rotationally grazed perennial stand versus this type of integrated system where annuals have been worked into the mix. And overall, we saw better animal performance, both for the lambs and for the cattle. So, slightly higher final body weights from the lambs and the cattle, a slightly better average daily gain from lambs and cattle when they're in that integrated system overall, and a little bit better body condition kind of coming through that end of the year. And like I said, I think that the summer annuals really helped during the heat of that summer when we've had these dry years and the perennial forages aren't growing as much.
Welcome to the Beef Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast, and today I have Dr. Amanda Grev with me. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So Amanda, you are the Forage Extension Specialist at the University of Maryland. Previously, you did a bachelor's in animal science at North Dakota State, master's and PhD in animal science at the University of Minnesota. A lot of cold weather there for a Forage Extension Specialist.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of a transition from the upper Midwest down to the Mid-Atlantic. I'm enjoying the longer growing season here.
But that's the benefit of getting out of your comfort zone and bringing a different knowledge base to area. And so you look at things slightly different.
Yeah, true.
So today we're going to talk about integrating annual forages into grazing systems. And so, especially in these areas on the East Coast and improved pasture scenarios or pastures that need to be improved, this is a big topic that can really benefit animal performance.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with annual forages since I started here in Maryland for a few different projects, but there's a lot of interest from producers in using annuals to help boost their pasture productivity, supply additional forage at certain times of the year. And we've had several back-to-back pretty dry summers here. So using some of the summer annuals have been really beneficial for people to provide some additional forage during that heat of the summer.
Why Genetics turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence, starting now.
Yeah, and you briefly talked about it, but what kind of benefits would a producer see by using an annual forage, whether or not it's a spring annual or a warm season annual?
Yeah, so one of the hardest parts with grass-based systems is that pasture production is not entirely consistent, right? We have different times of the year when we have more forage available or less forage available. So these annual forages can help provide additional forage maybe during those times of the year that when perennials are not as productive. And like I mentioned, kind of especially helping carry animals through the heat of the summer, give those perennial forage stands a little bit of a rest during those kind of hot, dry conditions.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is what we always called, and they probably do in Maryland too, is that summer slump.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. And
so you got a tremendous amount of forage growth in the spring and in the fall, but that summer is just dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it provides that ability, the opportunity to bring in a high quality forage that can extend that grazing season.
Exactly.
So what kind of pastures are you generally looking at that may need to be integrated with annual forage?
Yeah, so, there's lots of different options. Obviously, annual forages can be used in crop fields as a cover crop, and those potentially could be used as a source of forage as well. But even just within a pasture system, oftentimes we see areas that maybe are a little bit beat up. They're an older stand in need of renovation. Maybe it was a winter feeding area where a lot of, winter feed was fed, and that area got a little bit abused during the, winter, early spring months. So we see like those kind of situations as a way to kind of use annuals to sort of rejuvenate that stand, build back a little bit of, soil fertility, get some productive forages growing in there, and then eventually could be transitioned back to a perennial forage. Or we've had producers that are also just very happy with the way the annuals have been going, and they just keep a rotation going in those fields with different annuals at different times of the year. So a lot of variety and options.
Yeah, and I know you have some ongoing projects in the area. I think you've got a 3-year study that you're trying to wrap up that you have data on. But what kind of results would a producer see from either, forage quantity or biomass and livestock performance?
Yeah, so we've been doing a couple of different studies, like you said, working with these annual forages and kind of integrating them into an existing grazing system. And we've done this with lots of different species. So we had a dairy heifer study, and then more recently a mixed species sheep and beef co-grazing study. And basically kind of what we've been finding is that as you would expect, these annual forages can produce a lot of forage in a short amount of time, right? So yields tend to be a little bit higher than your traditional, cool season perennial stand, especially during those peak times of the year. And it can also produce a really high quality forage. So we can get some really good quality values from these annual forages. Oftentimes, we're finding that the annual forages are either equal to or maybe even slightly better in terms of, protein or energy compared to some of our perennial stands. So not only a lot of forage, but also some, really good quality forage from that. And then on the animal performance side, we were kind of comparing a perennial only system where we had sheep and cattle grazing on a well-managed, rotationally grazed perennial stand versus this type of integrated system where annuals have been worked into the mix. And overall, we saw better animal performance, both for the lambs and for the cattle. So, a slightly higher final body weights from the lambs and the cattle, a slightly better average daily gain from lambs and cattle when they're in that integrated system overall, and a little bit better body condition kind of coming through that end of the year. And like I said, I think that the summer annuals really helped during the heat of that summer when we've had these dry years and the perennial forages aren't growing as much. Having those high quality summer annuals there to supplement the nutrition of the animal and as well as the quantity of forage has been pretty invaluable. So we've had some really good success with it, and we're looking forward to kind of continuing to see how we can, work these into more grazing systems moving forward.
That's great. So I think the last question would be is, you're increasing biomass, you're increasing the quality, and you see an increase in performance. Are you also increasing grazing days, or in a lot of instances, guys are feeding hay during the summertime to get through that slump? Are you increasing capacity of maybe I can run more lambs or cows, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. I don't have the data compiled on the grazing days yet, so I can't tell you an exact number, but I'll give you an example. I can't remember if it was last fall or the fall before the annual forages. We had transitioned to a cool season annual out of our warm season annual stand, and we basically would have been able to keep grazing for an additional at least a month compared to the perennial stand, just because we had that hot, dry weather. Perennials were tapering off for the year, but we had this really nice stand of cool season annuals that we would have been able to graze kind of longer into the fall or winter months. And the other kind of benefit we've been seeing a lot is it helps preserve or maintain the persistence of our perennial stands. They got a nice long rest during that summer time when the animals were on the annuals. So they are then able to, we can use that forage as stockpiled forage for winter grazing, and hopefully kind of, save that forage for later in the year and, add to the season extension.
Well, Amanda, thanks for the time jumping on here. A lot of great stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing the results as you compile all this data.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to share about it.